it's really important to know how busy you are, how busy your head is, and to slow down. So just pace yourself. It's a long race that we're on. If you keep sprinting, you're just going to fall over and it'll all be over.
And just the fact that you can actually do that, right? That you can close your eyes and realize how busy your mind is, makes you realize that you are not your mind.
Yeah.
You are not your body. Like, your soul is in your mind and your emotions, but really your spirit is the one that is in control. Sometimes we get so intoxicated by our soul that we don't even let our true selves to manage the show, and that's why we make mistakes. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this other edition of Leaders in Tech podcast. I believe that this podcast will cover also a lot of business cases, so it will also become a breakthrough podcast in the future. My guest has a great career path, and what they're doing to change the world is incredible. So, David, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
David, for the audience, can you please tell me your full name and where do you live and what do you do for a living?
My full name is David Reid. I live in a house in Houston. And what do I do for a living? I am the Chief Technology Officer and the Chief Marketing Officer for a company called NOV.
Beautiful. And what does the company do?
So many things. We're mostly a manufacturer. So we have two large segments in the business, and then we make all sorts of things. We have kind of the large project type work where we assemble and build very complex systems. Usually we're manufacturing most of the parts of that. And then we have product business and services that we do. And we serve usually energy business in general, although we are in food production and all sorts of other things that we do outside of that. But we're usually oil and gas or renewables in most of our businesses.
David, how does one become a chief technology officer and a marketing officer at the same time?
It's really difficult. No one can. Not even me. It was a weird journey. I think it describes me the best. I mean, my technology side is really, most people assume it's IT, which it's not. I'm glad to say it's not my space at all. We have people who do that. But at least 10 times a day, someone asks me if I could connect with them on that foundation. So that's often misunderstood. What I do is work on technology that is new for the company. And so we do a lot of research and development and looking with our businesses at what could we do, or the things that we need to do across the company. And then marketing is understood as marketing, but both sides from my boss's perspective are taking the creative leaders and managing them. And that's really what I do, is I deal with future thinking and creativity and innovation in both fronts. And so that's really what I do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's wonderful. I never heard that role shared by one person, even in smaller companies, let alone a company your size, right?
Yeah, well, I was doing marketing and messing with technology, which I always did. I always was interested in where we were going. So no matter what my job was, it was usually forming future things for the company, be it technology or sometimes business cases and applications. And a lot of the things that ended up growing the company, I was the person they thought was an idiot until I wasn't an idiot. So I had a long career of doing things that everyone thought was a distraction that became the core of our business.
Isn't that incredible? I would love to research that, because for somebody to get where you are, it takes a while for sure, and a lot of mistakes.
I definitely was. I wasn't trying, that's for sure. When I go to the CMO meetings, I'm not like those other people, or I'm not like most of them. They do research us, so we have outside companies come and look at us and look at our personalities and our performance. And I do definitely perform differently than most CMOs, but they don't last very long. Usually they're like a 2 to 3 year job, because they often disappoint in expectations. But the being connected to the business, I started in a repair shop. I was trained as an architect, so not shouldn't be in a repair shop. That doesn't relate to anything I know or do. But someone met me socially, and they were in Scotland, and they were a Californian trying to impact a workshop of Scottish people. And I talked to them about what I studied in college, which was around the social connection to why American companies were building most of the new construction in London. And it was a lot to do with psychology and how people work and how they were able to break down silos and all that stuff. So in talking about that, this guy just said, will you come and work in my repair shop? And I was like, no, I don't really want to. I'll come and interview. So I did. It was an hour's drive away, which in Scotland is, considered, that's a weekend. You go for a weekend, you don't go for work every day.
Right.
So I went, and they all had Apple Mac computers in '92, like every desk as I was being interviewed. And that was the first thing that kind of drew me in a bit. They seemed different, and I liked it. And so I wanted to use the computers. So I thought I'd go for a month. So 32 years later, I'm still here. So they did something good. But everyone I work with has a story of working in the core of the business and coming up to the top of the business. So there's a general understanding of what we're doing that really helps in leadership.
This podcast is brought to you by ISU Corp. Are you having trouble with your software projects? Is there a project that's taking too long or a technology you can't handle? We can help. We are ISU Corp, experts in custom software since 2005. With almost 20 years of experience, we can solve any technical problem from new businesses to satellite software. We've done it all. Let us turn your ideas into reality. Learn more about how we can help by visiting us at www.isucorp.ca. Your solution starts here.
So that's incredible. So how big was the company when you first joined?
I was in the V part of NOV, the Varco part. They were more of a startup culture there. They were kind of an innovator. There was maybe 1,000 people and shrinking. I used to have it on one sheet of paper. Everyone, all the phone numbers of people in the head office anyway, and that kept shrinking because we were going through a downturn at the time. And then we acquired companies. The National and Oil Well acquisition, they came together and they acquired companies, and so we have an acquiring habit. I would say, rather than we're not people who acquire and then we're uncomfortable. We add companies really well. Like it's a part of our day. We just added another yesterday. There was another the week before. We've been pretty quiet, so there's kind of but on the end, on average, we're about 10 companies a year to 14 companies, so probably about one a month on average. So we're an acquiring type company, but it's a muscle we have. It's something we do every day. So it's not disruptive like it is for everyone else. It's just how business is. So it's been interesting growth, and I had this even from that original thought. What I'd learned was this integration of systems was kind of something that really intrigued me about what was happening in London with American construction companies, and so oil and gas needed that really badly, and we ended up buying all the main components, and I became fundamentally the architect of drilling rig floors. We were inventing the machinery. The people who bought it used to do the design of everything. Everything we made was custom. I started dictating the way a drilling rig would work, and after being on them and seeing all this stuff, I was able to kind of adapt a solution that was good enough. And then we pushed it really hard because on time, on budget, large complex projects was unthinkable in our industry. So we started doing that, and we did it en masse. It helped really grow the company to a huge size, but we were adding capabilities all the time. And we've done the same in other industries and other applications where we could constantly look at ways we can improve. And then we also then break it up, which is natural. So integration is usually a step that ends in broken up products, and so we never let everyone be a very corporate feeling place, so that everyone still runs on their own attributes and strengths. They compete in their own spaces. They're never living off of some big corporation, so we're not very corporate. When we have to work together, we can. We let every business run themselves. When we buy a business, we don't tell them what to do. We don't turn up and change everything. We let them decide. We don't put new people in over them who don't know their business to try and change them. We generally trust and invest in people. And the person who sold the company usually goes away, not always. But most of the people stay. And that's not the story of any other acquisition that you ever heard of. People are miserable when they get acquired. So sometimes they're shocked. Like you meet them and they're like, when is it going to happen? The thing, and you're like, hopefully never, hopefully you continue to just grow naturally, and then people pull from around the world because we have a system where people like to engage you and help you move into markets. And so you have to tell them to kind of don't get too excited by everyone talking to you because you will collapse your business with losing focus. So choose your markets, choose where you want to be, and people will pull you, but make sure you don't just say yes to everybody. So it's a good natural growth system. And I think the company works that way. I think we'd all hate it if it was more corporate. We'd be like, yeah, I don't want to hear. Corporate's not a human word even. It doesn't fit in any natural system. It literally means the opposite of natural systems.
And you guys
pretending we're not human and everything's okay. It's like it's not a good thing for people.
And you guys have a proof that it doesn't matter how big you get, you can actually have a startup mentality.
I know people, when I talk to other large corporations, they're always like, how? They have a lot of questions. I mean, one company said, you're so rock and roll. And I was like, I hope so. I don't think they are, but I would like to think that. But they're like, it sounds like chaos. I'm like, it is chaotic, it's messy, but so is your family, right? I mean, so are your kids and so are your parents. And it's messy, human systems, but organized and structured, and you just expect mess, and you deal with it well, and you don't act like that's not normal. And so yeah, there's a lot of so one company asked, how do you control people? And I was like, well, I've got some information for you.
You don't.
People aren't controllable. How are you controlling your wife? Is that going well? Like you don't control people. We're not in slavery here. We're in human systems. It's a contract of societal behavior. So yeah, so I like it. I liked it from the start. The Varco organization had a lot of these philosophies that I liked, and I just grew naturally in the company towards who I was.
David, give me just 1 second. I'm just gonna lock the door, and I'll be right back. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
When I did the first screening interview with you, and you started sharing how you guys grow through acquisitions and the company size and how you operate, I was astonished too. I was incorporated for about 10 years, working for blue chip companies, thousands and thousands and thousands of people, and the bigger the company got, the smaller I felt.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, people, when you visit our different offices around the world, they think they're the only sneaky people getting away with the behavior they get away with, which is just being yourself. They do good, like on a sneaky. We don't make big posters about how everyone's doing good, but they naturally do good for each other in the company. They do things that are, so we don't have we do have corporate campaigns where we do things together. But generally, you'll find people are doing much more good inside the organization naturally. They often confess to things, and you're like, that's okay. That's normal for us to be doing something for someone in the group, So they'll support causes that relate to, family members or someone, is struggling with something, or they just keep adapting. And they, like I say, they all think they're getting away with something, which is great. They're like, we're not like the big company, we're this way. And we're like, well, I know no one's like the big company because there's no such thing. We just have a culture that is the culture of small companies.
I went through a big merger when I was in corporate. There was these two insurance companies. A big insurance company was eating another big insurance company, but not as big. And I saw the writing on the wall. So I started looking for jobs like 3 months before.
We had, I think when Varco got bought, a ton of people left. In fact, first Tuboscope bought us, then we went into National Oil Varco. And both moments people jumped ship thinking the worst, just human brains,
Right.
I never forget in the sales team, they were like, oh, we're going to get worse cars. Like they had these rumors that they had really bad cars for company cars. And it was the opposite. They actually have much better cars, but they'd all left by the time they found that out. And a lot when we merged with National, we had really good bonus schemes, and they're like, that's going to go away. We're going to lose all of that. And they were kicking themselves for years because it didn't go away. They added to it and kept making it more positive. And And they just, people assume it's going to be horrible. And there was cultural, I mean, we had big cultural differences in that merger, where we had been a very young group with lots of young leaders. And then we saw that the other part of the company were all older, mature, like they looked at us like kids, and they thought we'd never get a chance. But patience and time, the good thing with older leaders is they're going to retire soon. And they all did, and it changed, and it all was okay after a short period. And performance wins. So we were a high performing company, and so we at the end of the day, the Barco part was very strong, and the culture was hard to beat, even though there was this more negative culture, people shouting as a method of control and manipulation, and that went away in a lot of places. It doesn't always go away. Human beings still have personal issues that cause them to lead poorly, but there's a lot more signs of health and well-being inside the company than in most corporations.
You know, what I did saw happen in one of the companies I worked for is that each inside the big corporations, we had smaller tribes. So we were separating about between 100 and 200 people, and that worked because it felt like a startup inside the bigger corporation.
Yeah, as long as you're free to do that and no one's overreaching, and there's not a culture where failure is an identity. You know, everyone's trying to hide failure so that the people don't think they are a failure, whereas it's just a part of learning and growth. And so as long as that's allowed, people. I remember there was when we merged, I took some risk, and everyone was like, "You're going to get fired. Like, you've taken this risk, and the first step failed. You're going to be out of here." And they were all like, "Keep me away from." There's a lot of weird politics. So I'd heard that the president had said this, that I was going to get fired. Like, I heard him say he's going to fire you. So I walked straight to his office, and he had someone in there, and I said, "Are you going to fire me?" He was like, "Oh, hold on a minute." And he took me to the side, and he was like, "No, I'm not. I just said it because I'm mad that it didn't work." And I said, "Well, it's going to work. You need to trust me. This is going to work." And he was like, "Okay, I just needed that information." But he had a culture, you know, of being that type of person. There was a lot of fear and intimidation in those days, and you know, that went away in time, you know. But I mean, most of it, for me, I just kept teaching what I'd been taught, you know. And so you can only control yourself and how you behave, and as long as you don't adapt to bad behavior. It's not that there's some perfect corporation here, but the more that you can get individuals to lead the way they need to lead and run the groups the way they know is right, eventually that becomes the culture, because culture is just what we do. You know, it's not what we say, it's not the posters, it's what you experience. And so if you're experiencing something different, which I have many times in this company, doesn't change me from continuing to have the culture I was given in the beginning, you know.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. You know, I was one of those guys because I grew up in very serious corporate culture. Was just a poster on the wall, not what happened every day. So when I finally realized that I needed to implement a true culture in my businesses, I took a year of learning leadership. Like, I actually went back to school and trying to figure out. And you know, the course that I took was a leadership course for technology people, because I was always a tech guy. So I was limping from the social side. And what I learned is that, number one, a culture is just the values that are installed in people that serve as filter to make decisions when the boss is not watching.
Exactly.
Right? So I just have 3 values. And, you know, I said, if I remember, I used to have like 12 values in my business. And like, I didn't even remember the values. So now it's 3 values. Those are the filters. Make your choice. And if you fail, we'll figure it out. Okay.
That's good. I felt that. I had a weird, like, when I got in the workshop at first, and this was the guy's problem, was he was trying to use American tactics on Scottish people who are fundamentally questioning all leadership and, you know, tend to be wildly independent. But they have a sense of fairness, you know. And I even though I made changes they would consider weak, you know, like making sure everyone had coveralls with their names on it. They'd be like, that doesn't matter. And then, you know, I would get safety equipment, and until someone almost got hurt, they would ignore the safety equipment. And then they'd tell me, you know, we're stealing it. Just letting you know, people are taking this stuff home. And I'm like, I'll just keep buying it because lives are worth it. And so until there was almost an incident, gladly there wasn't an actual incident, they all went, okay, we get it. Like, we get it. We're in. We don't want anyone getting, because you're naturally hitting something. They really do care about each other. It's a small town that we lived in. And then they had people who were unfairly not working, who'd been around a long time and they were just taking it easy. And my boss wouldn't do anything about it. So I talked to them. I was like 25 and I'm talking to a 60-year-old guy who spent his life giving to the company, but he stood over his work smoking, because people smoked in the workshop back then, and just would do nothing for 5 hours, and then he'd eventually work. So I called him in and I kind of said, here's the apprentice working and here's you working. Obviously this apprentice is either super fast or you're taking vacation at work. And that on the economics means someone has to get laid off, which is the worst thing you could say to anyone in one of those workshops, because you face everyone every day in a small space. Anyway, he changed his behavior. The rest of his career, he worked really well, stopped it. But that sense of the right thing is happening worked for people's buy-in. People who were working hard were getting rewarded. People who weren't were not. There wasn't any special relationships. So once everyone felt like it was a fair system, they made a really efficient workshop, and I charged more for it. We got paid more, and our business started making money. But everyone feels good about that, right? So it's creating that environment. But I got those clues from the top of the company, but in the middle, that wasn't that way. There wasn't a sense of integrity, and so you have to bring that in. And once people recognize that, they feel better, and they do better work. And Scottish people will be happy about that. They don't want the posters; they want to see the action.
Yeah,
the wrong things are being corrected, and I think that's been the story all along the way. When people feel like, okay, so if someone complains about their boss and their boss's job changes, it changes their mind altogether, like about everything, because they've always been told that never happens. Because maybe the person's not our good boss, or maybe this is the wrong person for them to work with. So if you're willing to adjust based on feedback, people start to be happier. Like I have a voice, I can, and it's not about I don't like that person. It's just not working, So if you fix things that aren't working, people get happier, and as they get rewarded as good things happen, in the company. And as long as those things happen, people have a sense of fairness and rightness, and it creates good teams, happy people.
And it's part of honesty and integrity, right? Like if you are actually honest and you have integrity in your core, things will get fixed themselves automatically. And also the people that don't belong to that culture, they will start leaving.
They do. I said it to someone. We had a president who was fairly bad news, and everyone started to talk about it. And someone was saying, can you not do something? I'm like, be calm. It's going to be okay. These things always work out. When people are bad news, it works out. And then a week later, this guy left the company, and this lady was like, did you know? And I was like, no. Actually, in my head, I was thinking, but when? Because it's really bad news when you have leaders everyone knows are a problem. But once like things are working out, it sometimes takes years. That's why people jump jobs too much, and they think the fix is to run away, that's like thinking the fix to marriage is to get another one and try again and try again and try. It doesn't work that way. Like the focus is work through things, work with the system. And if at the core, I think that's what changed me, was the leadership I knew when I heard them speak, that they were genuinely wanting these things to happen. And people would roll their eyes, but I'm like, I can bet on this. I can bet on a leadership team that says integrity is critical. I think I remember early we had a repair job where someone had taken a brand new giant drilling machine and put it out in the rain for 2 years, and then it didn't work because it was full of water. Well, there was a procedure to say don't do this, and it was covered with stickers that said don't leave it out in the rain without doing these things. And they brought it in. They were trying to finger us for like, it's your fault that this machine is full of water. And in the middle of that process, someone found that they didn't have a seal, obviously, in manufacturing, and they just glued together 2 pieces, hoping that it would seal, which is our fault. So the motor was our fault. So I told my boss, okay, I'm gonna own up to this. This part is us. We didn't seal it, so we got to take some responsibility. And he said, don't do it. The inspector's not here, so don't do it. And it was like, I wrote back to California and said, I'm going to do this. And they said, that's the right thing. We did something wrong there. And that would have failed even in operation.
Yeah.
So anyway, I loved it. I loved that I had that backing, and I knew I did. I knew if it was wrong on our side, we would take it, even if it was really hard for the company.
And you know what it is? David, what I found is that when you try to hide a mistake, it's because your ego is so high that you don't want to get the blame for what happened. And we have this stupid idea to think that by hiding something, everything is going to be okay. And all you're doing is making it worse.
No, well, and I think this works with a company, with politics or something going wrong, but when you dance with the thing that's wrong, you become the thing. Mm-hmm. So when people say this person's behaving this way, I'm like, good, now calm down and don't be bothered by it. Well, I can't. I need to, as soon as you're being bothered by it, you are that person. You're going to become them over time. You're going to start to believe, even though they're saying something about you that isn't even true, you'll become that thing. You'll become worse. You'll become like them. And it's the same with integrity and doing the wrong thing, is you'll become it. You'll become that system. And you'll convince yourself slowly but surely this is just how the world works, and this is because something happened to me, instead of justifying change, which is rotting our inner core. It's like it's worth. I did write an article once saying try and get fired, which I stopped talking about because I realized someone was going to sue me eventually because they lost their whole livelihood over doing the right thing. But I'm like, I believed, I went into lots of things thinking I'm going to do the right thing or get fired, and that's okay. And there was a lot of those, and people always had rumors about me. Like there was some coverage that I had that I was doing these things because people couldn't make those changes before. How is it? So in the workshop, they thought I was a high up Freemason. That's what they said. That's why you're able to do these things. And I was like,
a Freemason?
Yeah, that's what they thought. And I was like, I'm not, but that's okay. I found out later. And then it was what was the other one? We bought a company here, and they were just the worst culture ever. And I went in and just stood up to all of it. And I got away with it. And they were like, his wife is the CEO's daughter. Like I learned that years later, like that was the rumor. And I was like, because how could he do it? Like I turned up and we bought this company, and there was a lot of culture issues, and all my employees were underpaid, and we believed in paying people well. And I just changed all their wages in the middle of a downturn. And there was a woman I was hiring who was one of our top performers. And the head of HR, well, wasn't the head, one of the HR people came in and told me, you cannot move this woman into your department and double her wage. And I went, no. What you cannot do is sit in meetings with me and say she's the equivalent of other men and she's the highest performer we have, and then pay her half the amount that you're paying them. What you can do is go back to your office, change her wage to twice what it is, and then I can take her over into my department. And he didn't know what to do. He walked out of the room and did it, and I took her over and with the right wage. But it was, I'm like, you don't want to end up in court over this, do you? Is that your desire? And he was like, no, okay, good. Well, go do that then. But people think, how can you talk to someone that way when it's not your responsibility? And it was just the right thing,
Yeah. And the thing is that if you don't do it, you let corruption grow. And corruption is like a cancer in a company. When you see these huge companies fail, it's not because they made a big mistake. They made a lot of little mistakes, and instead of fixing them, they try to cover them. And that's what corruption is expanded until it eats up the company alive, right?
The philosophy of the old chairperson at Barco, he was very clear on humans are wanting to do the right thing, which I was like, whoa, that's a big statement. But they would fight for it. They would let people take advantage, just because they were willing to stand up to people at their core are wanting to be better. They're wanting to be good people, and we're gonna defend that. We're gonna fight for that. And in the process, people do become better because they're being believed in. People would overwork all the time, and they were constantly fighting, like, please don't sacrifice your family. And you'd be like, I don't know what else to do. I feel so compelled, and so much opportunity has been given to me. And they were right. So we all had to go through that process of balance and learning how to do that. But I thought that was crazy because I was so driven by following, believing in a company. And in the end, you have to realize it's always a balance. No company is a human being, so you should never treat it like it's a family member. It should be a fair contract. And I never, my bosses were saying it when I was younger, but I couldn't quite understand it. And I was unreasonably in favor of the company at the cost of my family. So that had to balance, and it took time. but people find that hard to believe. They think they work hard and long because they have to, but it's actually something you're deciding to do.
Yeah.
So you have to get into the psychology of why do you do the things you do, and why don't you understand the foundation of, that you have a whole life. You're not one person at work and one person at home. You're a whole person. They should not be different.
David, two beautiful points. Number one, you're right. I'm a man of faith, and I truly believe that we are made on God's image, and God He's love, right? So, yeah. But we're by inheritance, we are good people.
Yeah.
Fear creates a bad culture, and the bad culture infects other people. That's different. But everybody has in their mind they know that what's right and what's wrong. Like it's in our DNA.
Yeah, it's inherent. Yeah.
Right. And also the whole family thing. I was guilty of that. I almost lost my wife and my kids. I fell in love with money, and I saw my kids growing horizontal because I was leaving early and coming too late. Right. And then I was able to recover them after I realized the mistake I did. So when they were teenagers, I started building a relationship with them.
Good timing.
How many people don't do that? How many people they actually get a divorce thinking that their job is more important than their family?
No, most don't, and then facing the truth becomes really hard. When I've done leadership classes, you see it. You see the high performers who are the low performers in the class, because from a leadership standpoint, you're a high performer and that's your world, and no one enjoys working for you. They do perform, but when you're not in the room, and maybe if fear is working, but generally they're not giving you their best. You're not getting their creativity, their inventiveness, their ability to make work better. So it was interesting to watch, because who gave you feedback at the end of the course would be if they transitioned to the better core of themselves. It would be their employees, their bosses, their peers, but most interestingly, their families. We'd say, I don't know what you did, but they're not the same anymore. And you can see them, they're all dead men walking. They're just like, they have a zombie effect, that they're doing great work, but they're not there, They're so driven by something, that, it's sometimes it's money, sometimes it's how they grew up or whatever, they're driven by something, and that has become, in their limbic system, kind of a lie about who they are, So we all have that. We have experiences that have affected us, that cause us to start behaving a certain way, and that becomes something we believe is foundational when it's not. So to break that foundation it's a wonderful journey, but it's a private journey. It's not something you can give people clues, but you can't talk into their life, because this is work. So you can actually go in and say, you may have an issue with this, maybe you should talk to someone. And you encourage people to be at home more and be more aware and awake. Their family is telling them that they have an issue, and their friends can tell them exactly what it is. With employees, I'll sit with my direct folks and say, okay, I'll sit in on the reviews, which I want to do, because it's the most important teaching point, is learning to help create a place for people to grow, which is important compared to people thinking that we grow people, because we do not grow people. That is not our job, and that's back to a control element that's not appropriate. But we create environments for people to grow. And I like to tell them that when we're talking to people, when they have their bad moments, when something shows up where you're like, oh, that's going to be a problem, you can always guess the age. Meaning, so when someone behaves angrily or despondent or some inappropriate behavior, but they don't see it, there's an age to that behavior. And I like to have that conversation. If we see something, I'll say, okay, what age was that? And they will go 6 or 12 or 14, or it's usually childhood. And you're like, yeah. And now you're not to do anything with that information, but something happened to them at that age, and we are that person. Or whoever we were dealing with became that person. So when people get angry or mad, it's always based on some foundation.
Yeah.
And not that we share that with anyone, it's just good to know that it's a human thing, that they have a journey to unearthing that in their own time, in their own life. But if we can help them with information that helps them to find space to think about and do something about that, their whole life can change, and that is a wonderful thing, when you get people to find what they love and why they love it, and how to really perform and be at peace in their work and manage through turmoil and improve their behavior to themselves and to others. It creates an amazing environment.
You know, I truly believe we come to this world just to learn how to love unconditionally, just the way our Lord loves us unconditionally. And all these traumas from childhood, all these problems, I went through a process where I thought I was the victim, and I used that to justify myself to create pain to other people. Until I realized that all I had was neural pathways that were all messed up based on my childhood. With that information, I could start changing those. After I understood how my brain works, I could say, you know what, I'm not that guy. And that happened 45, 50 years ago. I can change, right?
It's classic with my wife, because it really upsets me, but it's always been true. When she'll say to me when I'm getting upset, I am not your dad. And I'll be like, I don't like that information, and I don't think you are, but I get that this is probably what this is. Anything that you're upset about, like, has a source, you know? And so, it's a wonderful thing to be able to do that work, and busyness is the opposite of that work. So if people are too busy, and we do that, it's a form of depression to actually overwork. There's people think it's just sadness, but no, there is a method where you can just stay busy so you don't cope with feelings. And a lot of men get caught in that. They'll stay busy and just to not deal with information. So it's creating that in a workplace, and it seems like the opposite. Like, this isn't how you do great work, but it's exactly how you do great work, and how you get surprised by employees when they can do amazing things, because they're starting to work out of a healthier self, and they can really produce. And I love that. I love to find people's superpowers, and everyone kind of plays down their superpowers. They don't see them as important or special. But then they're mad about everyone else who can't do what they do, right? Because they have this superpower, and it quickly becomes obvious, you know, okay, I got to get you out of you got to understand your place in the world. Like, you have something amazing that other people don't have, but it doesn't make you more important or less important, you know? It just makes you one of us who has something to give, like all of us. And so that management of ego and understanding, I'm part of a larger system. I'm an important part, and I have skills that are unique. People can really flourish when they stop worrying about everyone else or themselves, but start working on, how do I function? How do I do great things? And I love it. I love celebrating it and watching people who took full career paths that were wrong and seeing them correct it. And
beautiful.
Yeah. Everyone thinks I should be the boss of everything. Like, that's the answer, because society tells me that's success. And so it's not, you know, so.
And also, don't you find that people also change? Like, that's why we have, you know, the years of experience makes you wiser, right?
Yeah.
You know, my mom used to say that the devil was so powerful, not because he was the devil, but it's because he was so old, right? But like, if you think about it, even in my career path, like, it has evolved throughout the decades.
Yeah.
So at the beginning, I thought I was going to be an awesome developer, which I was, and then I became a great architect. Yeah. And then I tried to become an entrepreneur, and it was hard, but it worked, and it kept evolving. So that if you look at the career path of a lot of people, it changes over time, and they need to redesign, rediscover themselves, right?
Yeah. One of my up-and-coming leaders asked me the other day, sent me a text and said, "Oh, I've got this opportunity to go do something that I'd done before at a lower level, but I'm going to go help them out." And they asked, and I'm like, don't do it. I know it seems like a nice thing, but the message even to your own brain is that's where I belong. And I said, I was really good at rig design and machinery, and I loved it. And sometimes it hurts my feelings when people don't know that, but I honestly don't tell them on purpose, because it's not who I am. I didn't want to stay there. And there's people I knew in that era who are still doing that. And that's that person I was thinking of. I shared that with him. I said, I would be that person if I followed this kind of path, where people were trying to pull you back to an old job. And you can do it very well, but it doesn't mean it's where you're meant to be. Yeah. And so you have to work out, you know, I had expertise, but do I want to stay there? And some people should stay there. Like, that's their thing. Like, they want to do that the rest of their life. But But for me, I love doing it, but I had to learn what do I really love? Because even in architecture, I would build things and I thought I love to see it built, which I learned that. I built wrong drove me crazy. So when you're younger designing things, when they see you're young and they immediately do whatever they want, like all the plans are out the door. And like I remember a house where they put the stairs somewhere else, and I'm like, what are you doing? So we thought this was better, and it's because you're young, right? So they're just like, well, you want to rip it out and pay the money to build another staircase? I was like, and so when I had plans that I left, I walked away. They built it like it was a religious document. Suddenly, everything was the way I wanted it. And I had to wonder, what is it that I like about all this? You know, because in architecture, they do a bunch of ego stuff that's really good for you. Because if you build what you want, you're failing.
Yeah.
You have to build something that serves, that has a purpose before you got there.
Yeah.
And you have to serve the purpose, you know, not serve yourself. And so it's an interesting management of ego where you have to learn, I have a function here, but I am not the answer to all things. I have a tool to add to all of this.
Yeah.
So that's always been good for me, I think, in the process. And I think I was designing equipment all the time. I had just future ideas for machines. I used to draw them and draw them and draw. I'd sit on planes and draw them. And then I realized I didn't care. Like, I don't actually care that these things happen or not, which is what I thought from architecture. I eventually worked out. I actually prefer seeing human beings find their thing. Like, that's actually what really is in my passion list. And I was crushing human beings at first to get the goal done, including myself. So it took me a while to get well enough to understand, I don't really care that I invented something. It isn't important to me. And I started when I was flying. I always on planes, and I used to just draw ideas for machines all the time. And I changed that to drawing people. And so I started taking pastels on a plane. And my first drawing, one of the air hostesses said, that looks like the photograph. Can you do that with any photograph? I went, I don't know. It's the first time I've done it. Well, if I gave you a picture, could you draw? Yeah, sure. So I drew her son. And then that kept going. They started talking to each other. And when I was on a plane, they'd say, can you do one for me?
Wow.
And I did that for a long time. And then I started doing large oils, and I started, doing a lot more art in my life, and just balanced me out much better. I was much happier because I liked that. I liked that process, and it was good for me. So
beautiful. David, it's been over 40 minutes already. I don't want to abuse your time. Thank you so much for being on this show. And I learned so much from you. And I think my audience is going to get delighted with all the wisdom that you shared. And let me ask you one last question before we finish this podcast interview. If you had access to a billboard in front of the busiest highway on earth, what would you write in it?
Breathe.
Breathe. Live.
just breathe. Just the idea of that whole concept of breathing, as simple as it sounds, all of our energy comes from breathing. We don't breathe enough. But it's that idea of even the time it takes to take a deep breath and to start. When you do that, everything slows down a bit and your brain starts to function and you start to become aware. And people don't. I remember I actually was speaking in a church one time, and then the next day was speaking at a business thing on leadership. And because it was the same message in both. So I got to the end of the Monday, not the Sunday, and I said, okay, everyone, close your eyes. And I realized it wasn't a church environment, which would have been the time to close your eyes. And it was a moment where I remembered the importance of when you close your eyes and you realize how busy your head is. And it's almost causes you to open your eyes immediately. Like, that's too much to cope with what's going on in my head. And I use that with the leadership team to just say, it's really important to know how busy you are, how busy your head is, and to slow down. So, and to know, just pace yourself. It's a long race that we're on.
Yeah.
And if you keep sprinting, you're just going to fall over, and it'll all be over. So,
and David, and just the fact that you can actually do that, right? That you can close your eyes and realize how busy your mind is, makes you realize that you are not your mind.
Yeah.
You are not your body. Like, your soul is in your mind and your emotions, but really your spirit is the one that is in control. Sometimes we get so intoxicated by our soul that we don't even let our true selves to manage the show, and that's why we make mistakes.
Yeah, and I think I run a nonprofit, and one of the operations heads I talk to all the time is always freaking out because I'm happy to have new things happen all the time, and they're all terrified because it's all growth and lots of things happening. And she has a text that she printed out that I sent her, and it just says, "It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay." It's just a lot of cut and paste, and she printed it because you just have to remember, like, it's going to be okay. And when you slow down, it's because you're trying to manage things that you can't manage and you're not in control of. So sure. I think that whole idea is very helpful.
David, thank you so much for your time. If people would like to find out more about you, are you on LinkedIn? Where can they?
Yeah. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. Follow Red M, join the movement, and I connect to everyone who does that. So it's an easy way into my LinkedIn, but we're it's a bunch of professionals fighting for survivors of sex trafficking. So
beautiful. That's great.
Who doesn't want to do that? So that's a nice way. If you want to meet me, come to our events. I do those things all the time in my spare time. So
that's fantastic, David. Thank you so much. God bless you and have a beautiful rest of the week.
Thank you.
Blessings. Cheers.
See ya.
Thank you for tuning in to the Leaders in Tech podcast. Check in next week to keep learning how to use technology and leadership to change the game. See you next time.